Now, Ghana is making progress in talks to restructure its external debt and hopes to achieve a resolution by the end of the year. Its finance minister said on Wednesday in a budget speech which showed that a little bit of shrink is being observed in the deficits being recorded. The country's finance minister, that is Ofori-Atta, said on negotiations to restructure Eurobonds, Ghana had received illustrative proposals on debt treatment scenarios from the two bondholder groups. And he said that the aim was for an agreement in principle on restructuring parameters with Ghana's official bilateral creditors in the coming weeks. Now, joining me from Accra, Ghana is Patrick Baah Abankwa, a financial analyst and investment advisor. Thank you so much, Patrick, for talking to us.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Now, Ghana has been about this restructuring deal for quite a while now, and there are a number of measures to edge it closer to securing the deal, and that includes issuing new bonds with lower coupons. Now, kindly walk us through how this will actually help the country reduce the overall debt burden and make it more affordable to service.
Okay, so issuing of new bonds with lower coupons, for me, helps Ghana reduce its costs in two ways. The first one is that lower interest payment comes with this new arrangement. And with lower interest payment, or what we call the coupon rate, Ghana will be paying less interest on its debt each year. And this will free up funds that can be used to invest in other areas of the economy, such as infrastructure and education. The second bit is that with this new arrangement, we are going to enjoy longer maturity periods. Now, new bonds that are typically issued with longer maturity periods means that Ghana will not have to repay all the debt as soon as possible. And this will give the country more time to grow its economy and be able to generate revenue needed to repay the debt when the due dates are up. So these are the two main benefits that we are going to get with these new bonds that the government is issuing to the investors.
Of course, just as you have said, issuing new bonds with lower coupons can make it easier for Ghana to sell its debt to investors. But typically, we know that investors are attracted to bonds that offer higher interest rates, but they are also willing to accept lower interest rates if they are confident that the issuer will be able to repay the debts. You have said that Ghana, looking at the span or the extension of the debts, if of course it is extended, Ghana will be able to pay. But then what are the assurances that Ghana, if it's able to expend its bonds, will be able to offset its debts?
I think the government has been able to spell out some of the initiatives that gives the kind of assurance that these investors will want to consider before they accept this deal. The first one has to do with government implementing fiscal reforms. If you realize, government is committed to reducing its debt, budget deficit, and improving its tax collection effort. And for me, this will help generate the revenue that is needed to pay these debts when they are actually due. Again, government is also renegotiating debt reliefs. What it means is that government is working with its creditors to negotiate debt relief packages that will reduce the overall burden of the country. And for me, this also helps and afford the country a bit of time to service its debt. Again, when the economic conditions of the country improves, then Ghana will have a lot of leverage to be able to implement the reforms that will reboost the economy. And as the economy reboosts, it generates more revenue, which gives these investors confidence that the government will be able to pay the loans that are being restructured from their original duration to another duration, which for them will give them a bit of comfort to know that the government has the ability to be able to pay these debts when they fall due in future.
Now, Patrick, from what you're saying, and what I can deduce, you are more optimistic looking at if there is an extension on the debt duration to be paid. And of course, you also said if the economy peaks in between that time. But some people or some economists are still worried about the possibility of, if the economy does not pick up, if there's a bit of stagnation or there are internal or external shocks. Of course, if we have that extension, it would increase the interest rates that would make that, of course, the interest rates that would also have to be included in what Ghana would have to pay, looking at the extension of the debts that are to be paid. So don't you think that might also affect Ghana's finances? Because even looking at the duration, there could be a possibility whereby Ghana would still have to borrow more money from other creditors, and that would continue to increase the debt portfolio for the country. Don't you think that might also add to the debt burden?
I do agree with you. I do agree with you that it has a burden and a toll on the economy. So it has to be managed carefully so that the external shocks do not have direct impact on the economy. So for me, I agree with what you're saying that it's a bit delicate. The government has to balance between the long-term prospect and what it has to do now by way of commitment.
Hmm. All right, let's move on. Now, Ghana's budget deficit for the first 8 months of the year was 3.0% of GDP, compared with a target of 4.6% of GDP. Now, this shows that the country's economy is recovering in bits with a smaller budget deficit target. Now, with all these proposals, can the deficit become narrower and Ghana escape its worst economic crisis in a generation?
Yeah, I think the indicators are quite promising. Looking at where we started off the year from and where we are now, government has tried as much as possible to be disciplined in some of the indicators that are very key when it comes to spending. So the fiscal discipline that has to do with reducing the budget deficit has been well streamlined. Government itself, as a paying employer, has been able to streamline some of its expenses in terms of infrastructure projects that were getting a toll on the economy's finances. Were also streamlined to be able to afford government a bit of space to be able to engage in other critical aspects of the economy that needed expenses. So I think that with time, we are able to see a bit of improvement. As you know, we started a year off with an inflation of about 58%. As we speak, it's in the 30s. We look at the stabilization of the Ghana cedi over the last 5 months. It has been a bit stable. So these are all gains that are beginning to reflect, even though on the ordinary Ghanaian, we are not seeing the full benefit of some of these things. But I think that with time, things are picking up and we expect that things will stabilize before somewhere mid of next year.
Now, of course, some analysts are still bothered about this issue. You said there's a bit of stability in some areas. There's a bit of narrowing in debts, in deficits, as we see it. But then looking at other sides of it, the issue of high inflation rates, the issue of the debt burden, the issue of course, large debt burden, and other challenges that Ghana is faced with. Now, of course, we know that Ghana is in talks with IMF and the other creditors in terms of looking out to restructure its debts and a little bit of shedding of weight on other sides. There are proposals on the table. So in terms of these talks, as regards to structuring Ghana's debt, what cautious steps do you think should be taken to ensure that, of course, Ghana is able to restructure its debt, is able to pay up, and of course is able to improve its economy in the long run?
I think that in managing government's debt, the first thing that government has to continue to do and ensure that it does to the fullest has to do with continuous implementation of sound fiscal policies. If government does not manage its expenses as against projected revenues, things are going to get worse with time. So I think that's the first thing government has to focus on, fiscal discipline. The second one is that we need to enhance revenue collection in this country. If revenue lines keep on dwindling, and the few that are always paying the taxes, for example, are the same people that are always squeezed, then with time, people will find ways and means to evade taxes. And when that is done, we will not have the revenue to be able to match the expenses, and the fiscal discipline I mentioned will become a problem again. Again, government should prioritize investment into sectors that will help boost the economy, not just any sector. A sector like production sector, manufacturing sector, agricultural sector, which still employs about 50% of the people that we have in this country. That is where the investment should go. And by doing so, we'll be able to reduce the country's reliance on borrowing to be able to generate the resources that we need to repay existing debt and also being able to expand the economy as a whole. So I think government should focus on these three key areas. The fiscal discipline is very important, revenue collection, and also prioritize investment into key sectors that help boost the economy. We look at even the service sector, which has been growing and almost at par with the agricultural sector, must be supported. And once you support these sectors, then the revenue that we expect as a country, the GDP growth that we expect, we'll be able to see it and sustain it over a period of time.
Now, talking about expectations, Patrick, Ghana targets GDP growth of at least 2.8% next year. an inflation rate of 15% by the end of December 2024 from more than 35% in October this year, and a primary budget surplus of 0.5% of GDP next year. So these are expectations, these are projections. Now, is that achievable? Is that achievable from all indicators available? And of course, is that also achievable based on the recommendations that you offered a while ago?
Yeah, I think that they are achievable. If they are achievable to the extent that government will have to put together measures to ensure discipline. Government will have to put in place measures to ensure that agreement that they've signed up with, for example, IMF, in terms of ensuring that the wage bill of the country does not blow up. This is, respected. Again, ensuring that we don't go into the capital market again to borrow, because that is where we had our challenges from. Again, government does not compete with the private sector in terms of the local borrowing. If government is able to maintain its focus around this area, then I think the target that the government has set for itself going to the year 2024 is possible. But of course, we have to also factor in external factors, the shocks that perhaps we don't expect them to happen. If they happen again, then it may derail this projection that the government put together yesterday.
So we can only hope that there won't be any other surprise shocks in the Ghanaian economy, so that, of course, these proposals are tabled before the creditors, and, of course, even as ongoing negotiations are on the table, everybody will be able to come to a compromise and achieve what is worthwhile. Of course, even as we look at the possibility of a better economy for Ghana and its ability to pay its debts. Patrick Abankwa, a financial analyst and investment advisor, thank you so much for gracing our show.
Thank you too for having me once again.